The movies that got the most bang for their buck. Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Everybody dreams of making heaps of money for the least amount of investment. So, today I am going to talk about some movies that hit the jackpot on an epic scale, with the equivalent of chicken feed as investments. The first one is Juno, starring Ellen Page, following a couple of teenagers confronting a pregnancy. Juno was released in 2007, after it had spent about $7 million as its original production budget. It went on to gross nearly $230 million worldwide, grossing over 30 times the original budget. At the Academy Awards, Juno received 4 nominations, including a nomination for Best Picture, and won the award for Best Original Screenplay. After receiving a standing ovation following its premiere, Juno was invited to many international film festivals, receiving praise from critics and audiences alike all around the world. Juno earned more than 6 times its original production budget by earning $42 million worth of profit when it opened in limited release. It played in only 7 theaters in New York and LA. So far, Juno remains the highest-grossing movie amongst all of the other pregnancy-related or themed ones. I don't think many people have heard of or are aware of this next film. God's Not Dead was released in 2014 and tells the story of a newly enrolled student forced to prove the existence of God to his atheistic philosophy professor. This movie was produced with just $2 million in total resources, but grossed more than $60 million in North America, achieving more than 30 times its original production budget. Despite the fact that the critics made harsh comments on this movie, God's Not Dead surprisingly hit the jackpot in 2014 and even reached the break-even point on the very first day of its release. The film was shot on college campuses and took only 20 days. The entire production period for the film was less than 6 months. God's Not Dead was first released in around 700 theaters, but it got so popular that it ended up being played in more than 2,000 theaters in its prime. Due to its surprise success, 2 additional films were produced afterwards, but their results were not nearly as noteworthy as their predecessors.
On trial. Do you think you're smart? Simple question. Why do you hate God?
This next movie is about a stripping show, starting in England and spreading all around the world. The movie is called The Full Monty, in British slang, stripping all the way down, usually for men. The Full Monty was released in 1997 and earned more than 70 times its original production cost. This movie's budget was about $3.5 million, but it grossed $260 million. Interestingly, The Full Monty was rated R, but despite the adult rating, went on to earn about $80 million in England and rose to popularity all around the world. The Full Monty was directed by Peter Cataneo as his debut movie. As a debut movie, nobody was anticipating the movie's critical success on its release. The Full Monty is a comedy, following a group of guys laid off from the steel mill, moving into the raunchy world of stripping. Despite its comedic moments, it also touches on serious subjects: unemployment as a result of an economic crisis, conflicts between social classes, and homosexuality. As a result, it was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. My Big Fat Greek Wedding landed a record big hit by netting $370 million with only $5 million of production budget. As you may know and maybe even remember, the 90s and early 2000s were the golden era of romantic comedy. And surprisingly for the time, this movie overshadowed and defeated even Julia Roberts and Meg Ryan, the queens of rom-coms at the time. In North America, it became the most successful romantic comedy movie ever, and still holds its place among the top wedding-themed movies to this day. Nia Vardalos, who is cast in the lead role, made her debut through this movie. She wrote a plot based on her own experiences and created a one-woman play under the same title. The play caught the attention of Hollywood's actors and producers, including Tom Hanks, who decided to make the play a movie after he had first watched it. Nia Vardalos' career was mostly limited to TV shows before the play, but after the hit success, she was lucky enough to both have written it and starred in it. Napoleon Dynamite is the story of an outwardly awkward, clumsy, and overall unbecoming 16-year-old boy. This movie, following the boy's relatively normal but definitely weird daily life, was produced with just $400,000 US, but achieved more than 100 times its original production budget by earning about $46 million as gross revenue. Napoleon Dynamite was first made on 16mm black and white film as a 9-minute long assignment for class. The director, Jared Hess, dropped out of school and followed various film festivals and casting directors to find investors and make his short film a feature-length movie. After 2 years of effort, he finally became a director who even produced a big hit box office movie. When he was looking for producers and investors and sending them the script, most of them replied that it was too weird and quirky, and most of them did not like it. Despite initial rejection, this movie hit the jackpot anyway. Nowadays, Napoleon Dynamite syndrome is a term in the movie industry for a strange movie with inexplicable popularity, usually made by a new director. The next movie does not need much introduction. The movie Once is about a dream, music, and the love between a man and a woman. Once was produced with around $150,000. John Carney, the director of this movie, wrote the script and cast 2 actors using his own salary. Due to the low production budget, they shot most of the scenes on the streets or at friends' houses. But in the cinemas, the movie ended up grossing more than $20 million US, achieving more than 130 times the original production budget, and became the foundation used to produce further sequels, Begin Again and Sing Street. Interestingly enough, Once was quite popular in Asia, especially in South Korea. South Koreans loved the movie's music and soundtrack, composed by Glenn Hansgard. Another movie directed by John Carney with the title Begin Again was more popular in Korea than in North America, establishing a unique record that it holds to this day. Amongst the younger audiences, I'm not sure whether many of you know this movie or have even heard of it before, but everyone should know George Lucas, who directed the multi-billion Star Wars industry. This movie is in fact the very same George Lucas's debut film, American Graffiti. Basing its plot on some of George Lucas's life and experiences, American Graffiti tells the story about a group of teenagers in the 1960s, going wild, cruising, and going on rock and roll adventures. With just a $770,000 production budget, it grossed $140 million, which is over 180 times the original cost of its creation. American Graffiti was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and was even deemed to be one of the 20th century's masterpieces. Aside from the amazing box office, this film brought something else to the table that revolutionized the film industry. When producing the film, George Lucas could not pay many of the staff in full, so instead, he promised to include every staff member's name at the end of the movie. This marked the beginning of the modern after-movie credits that we see everywhere today. Thanks to the success of American Graffiti, George Lucas was able to gain more opportunities to work on his passion projects, eventually leading us to the phenomenal Star Wars franchise. Next is a movie that you can recognize from just a few seconds of its world-famous soundtrack. It's the story of Rocky, teaching you real sportsmanship. Starring Sylvester Stallone, Rocky was the movie that jump-started his career and launched his rocket ship to Hollywood stardom. With an original budget of $1 million, the first Rocky movie grossed a total of $220 million in cinemas, generating over 200 times its production budget. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards and won 3, including Best Picture and Best Director, becoming the best sports movie ever. Before his performance in Rocky, Sylvester Stallone was basically nameless and essentially unrecognized. After watching a boxing match between Muhammad Ali and Chuck Wepner, Stallone wrote the script to Rocky in just 3 days. Believing that his script had great potential for the big screen, he insisted that he play the titular role himself and rejected proposals from agents and production companies that insisted on recasting actors. This was his big break and his start on the journey that got him to where he is today. So far, 8 movies have been produced as part of the Rocky franchise, including 5 Rocky sequels, Rocky, Rocky Balboa, and spin-off sequels named Creed. Sylvester Stallone co-wrote all of the movies and directed all of the titles except for Creed. I'm willing to bet that no one will expect the next movie. It is Supersize Me, which is a one-man food show, directed and starred in by an eccentric who ate only fast food hamburgers in order to investigate the effects and for the ultimate betterment of mankind. This independent documentary was all done by Morgan Spurlock, and he himself was the star of the show. This movie spent about $65,000 for production, but grossed $20 million, getting more than 300 times the original money's worth. Morgan Spurlock ate only McDonald's 3 times a day for an entire month to shoot this film. As a result, over that single month, he gained 11 kilograms, spiked his cholesterol, experienced every mood swing from A to Z, and even got liver dysfunction. Supersize Me, vividly showing how fast food drastically affects our lifestyle, was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature and openly raised a social issue facing the public of the time, and that still faces us to this day. The final boss of our bang for their buck listing is a movie that ended up grossing 330 times the original production budget for shooting and producing the film. George Miller's original Mad Max takes the top of our list today. George Miller himself used to be a doctor, working in a hospital's emergency room. He produced a short film based on his experiences of seeing many injuries and death in an emergency room and witnessing his friend's death due to an unfortunate car accident. That short film was remade as a feature-length movie, Mad Max, illustrating a violent post-apocalyptic world. It was almost impossible to find a production company which could invest in a director who used to be a doctor without any prior filmmaking experience. So, in order to generate some production budget, George Miller and his friend partially funded the movie themselves, with Miller doubling as the set's medic and his friend driving an ambulance car for some of the shoots. Their efforts were greatly rewarded. Mad Max held the Guinness World Record for most profitable film and kept that spot for a long time. That concludes today's movies. Did you enjoy this list of films that got the most bang for their original buck? Well, I hope you did, because we didn't even get to the horror genre. Next time, expect some spooky, scary movie titles that ended up hit successes. If you did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.